Well, this report was prepared by 7 separate teams which were sent to investigate basically the Irish Church following Pope Benedict's letter sent 2 years ago this very day to the Irish Catholics, and that in turn followed the publication of the Murphy report the previous 9, which looked at the abuse of children in the Dublin Archdiocese and how that was handled by church and state authorities. And they looked, when they came to Ireland last year, they investigated the 4 Catholic archdioceses, they investigated seminaries where it came to the training of priests, and they looked at the male and female religious congregations, both separate. These are very high-powered delegations led in the main by cardinals. Now, the reports were presented to Rome by the end of last year. This today, what was published today, is a 7.5-page summary of the main findings of that report. And as Cardinal Brady emphasised at the press conference today, it really was a pastoral matter, this visitation. So, I mean, expectations would have been fairly high, and I expect people who would have had high expectations are going to be disappointed. But that said, the report does talk about the shame at what happened in Ireland, acknowledges what happened in Ireland in terms of the abuse of children. It emphasises that the Church must remain open to hearing their stories and must continue to support people who were abused here in Ireland itself. It goes on then to talk about the formation of young priests in seminaries. It says that there will be a new programme on child protection as part of their formation. There's going to be greater intellectual input into their formation, and they will be formed in separate buildings from other students. For instance, that's already happening in Maynooth, where they've put in doors recently separating physically the seminarians from the students in the main college itself, and indeed they're eating separately as well. It looks at the various religious congregations and says that they must go back to the inspiration of their founder and indeed to the Gospels, and look at that over the next 3 years in greater detail. There should be greater communion or collaboration between themselves and the bishops when it came to renewal generally, but also when it came to the implementation of guidelines which should be consistent across the Irish Church, and that these guidelines need to be updated in the context of a new document brought out by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith last May. I suppose what will jump out at a lot of people about this is, well, 2 things. One, there is to be looking at the structure of the Irish Church. There are 26 dioceses here today. It's widely acknowledged that this is too many for a small country like Ireland. For instance, in Los Angeles you have a similar population, 4.5 million Catholics. They have 1 cardinal archbishop or about 5 or 6 auxiliaries. We have 26 dioceses with 26 bishops, and on top of that a number of auxiliary bishops. So there's a joint reflection going on between Rome, the Irish Church, and there will be consultation with people in the local diocese on how these can be reconfigured, to use the phrase. And there also is a line about dissident clergy. The visitors, or visitators as they insist on calling them, noticed that there was quite a degree of dissent among a substantial number of priests when it came to official church teaching. And they want this addressed because they say, see, this is not the way to renewal, and this is not the way to the truth. And I imagine that that will make a lot of people sit up and wonder, because one thing we can be sure of, looking back on the history of abuse in Ireland, is that it was conducted under men and women who were highly orthodox when it came to the teachings of the Church and its orthodoxy. So it's almost, in a sense, out of context that the visitors should draw attention to this issue in this instance. Now, I mean, it may be appropriate in others, but anyhow, they have done so. To date, the reaction that I have had has been one of disappointment. There was, because there was such a hoo-ha made about these 7 visitation teams here last year. This is unprecedented, that a national church should be investigated so rigorously and by such a high-powered number of people, that the expectation was that their findings would be far more radical, far more forceful, in line indeed with the Pope's own acknowledgements in his letter 2 years ago, which was pretty damning of the leadership of the Catholic Church in Ireland. There is nothing of that in this document. It's very general, pretty woolly, aspirational, calling for renewal, spirituality and all of that which you'd expect to, but very little in the way of concrete indicators for the way forward. And some would say that the renewal of the Irish Church is not the function of Rome, it's the function of the Irish Church. And this is their way, or their pointer, as to how that may take place. And I mean, the more immediate thing, where will they go from here, is the Eucharistic Congress in June. And there'll be a huge, that's a spiritual event, it's a liturgical event. There'll be a huge emphasis on catechesis in that. Congress, in other words, the teaching of the fundamentals of Catholic doctrine. Again, that tends to happen at every Congress, but there'll be a special emphasis, I imagine, at this time, this year, in the context of what happened here in Ireland. And there is a theological symposium taking place in Maynooth in the lead up to that. There are 200 places. I gather it's almost fully subscribed already. So, I mean, the renewal that the Church is heading down is a spiritual renewal, and they see that that is fundamental towards rectifying the great evils and corruption that took place in or under the aegis of the Irish Catholic Church.